Mr. Chairman, I thank the members for filing your cards. I thank my colleagues for answering most of the questions. I will now address the last set of the questions. And after my speech, there will be a joint segment. Some members of the House asked me yesterday why are issues concerning housing and workfare being posed to MOE. That's because we have a joint segment where MOE, MND, MOM, MSF will address the issues on uplift and inequality. We have been implementing significant changes to the education system over the past several years. This is despite our system being very highly regarded around the world and producing strong students' outcomes. So in our current position, it is easy to feel complacent and tell ourselves, let's just tinker at the edges. But that would be a mistake. We must keep evolving, adapting to ensure the system is fit for the future. And where necessary, take bold steps. Where we can build new pathways, we will. Where appropriate, we will invest resources to improve our infrastructure for education. But at our advanced stage of development, the defining changes are about processes. This is the most complex because you dive into the source codes of the system, recognize trade-offs, optimize them, and even find ways to break out of them. So for example, we have to balance between the joy of learning and the rigor of education. Our students need proper paper qualifications to open doors to jobs, but they also need to pick up skills, which they need to progress in life and in their career, and these are not so easily credentialed. And so we are calibrating those balances wherever necessary. So in this context, I will talk about the following today. First, a program to further improve our education infrastructure. Second, an update on how Skills Future movement, SMS Chee Hong Tat has spoken about this, and I will focus on how Skills Future has led to building of new pathways in our IHLs, or Institutes of Higher Learning. Finally, I will talk about how we will introduce greater flexibility in our secondary school system to help develop every student's strengths. Now first, infrastructure developments, specifically for junior colleges, JCs. Mr. Ang Wei Neng, Mr. Murali Pillay asked about this. 4 pairs of JCs were merged this year. The transition went quite relatively smoothly, thanks to the tremendous efforts of all stakeholders, teachers, students, parents, alumni members, and advisors on the ground. They designed new uniforms, new school crests, they composed new school anthems, they held numerous activities to get students from the merged JCs to get to know each other better. Great effort was made to preserve the heritage of the component JCs that merged, including adoption of double-barrel merged names. So I congratulate the 4 merged JCs for starting a new chapter, and I wish them greater achievements ahead. But more changes are to come, and MOE will need to trouble them a bit more, and I seek their understanding. Because a few of the merged JCs were amongst the oldest government JCs, with campuses that has gotten somewhat outdated. We have been progressively improving the building infrastructure of ITE and polytechnics, and I think our JCs deserve new campuses too. So we'll start a multi-year, multi-phase JC rejuvenation program. When choosing which JCs to start with, we considered several factors: the age of the JC, the state of its existing facilities, and also the availability of holding sites while you build new campuses. We also considered whether MOE will need time to engage stakeholders for co-funding arrangements, because that will apply to the government-aided JCs. So the first phase, starting in 2022, will involve rebuilding 3 JCs and upgrading 1. So 3 SIRs, 1 MUP, for those of us who remember what MUP is. And they are as follows. First, in the east, the Temasek JC. It has the oldest campus among the government JCs, 43 years old. We will temporarily house the JC at the former Tampines JC site, which is now vacant, and rebuild the Temasek JC's existing campus. Once complete, it will move back to the existing site. Second, in the west, and maybe this will address some of Mr. Ang Wei Neng's puzzles yesterday. Jurong Pioneer JC, which is now located at the former Pioneer JC site. So prior to the merger, Jurong JC was one of our oldest government JCs, 35 years old. So we will build a new campus at the site of the former Jurong JC, and once completed, Jurong Pioneer JC will move there. We chose this permanent site for the merged JC because of its convenience and accessibility. And as Mr. Ang Wei Neng mentioned, it is near the Jurong Lake District and will be served by the future Jurong Region MRT line. Third, in the north, Anderson Serangoon JC, currently located at the former Anderson JC site. Prior to the merger, both are old JCs. Anderson at 36 years old, Serangoon JC at 31 years old. After merger, we decided to locate the merged JC at the former Anderson JC site because it is next to Yio Chu Kang MRT station and its facilities can better accommodate the merged JCs. The same consideration is still valid in deciding the future permanent site of Anderson Serangoon JC. This means that at some point in the next few years, we will need Anderson Serangoon JC to move temporarily back to the former Serangoon JC site and move back to the current site when the new campus is completed. This is not ideal because it involves 2 moves instead of 1. We may also have to make additional provisions at the former Serangoon JC site to accommodate the merged JCs temporarily. But we will plan the transition so as to minimize hassle to students and staff. And finally, Yishun Innova JC, now located at the former Yishun JC site. So prior to the merger, Yishun was also one of our oldest government JC, 34 years old. We will give the former Innova JC site a significant upgrade, since it is not old enough to be rebuilt. And once completed, we will move Yishun Innova there. We chose this as the permanent site because it will be served by the new Thomson East Coast MRT line. Phase 1 will be completed by around 2025, and we are already planning for phases 2 and 3, involving upgrading the 4th of the merged JCs, Tampines Meridian, and also Victoria JC, and older government-aided JCs. The new premises will support the evolution of JC education, where lessons are now a lot more interactive and learning is more holistic. So instead of just classrooms we have today, we will have seminar rooms, which are modular, flexible, to support more interactive pedagogies. We will make the campuses more digitally enabled. We will have facilities that encourage sports and CCAs, such as indoor sports halls, which will be designed so that they can also be open for community use. And the JCs will have campuses that are fit for the future. Next, I will give an update on new pathways in our IHLs as part of the Skills Future movement. Our objective is to have a more flexible system of education upgrading that is not overly dependent on past academic results, but takes into account the varied strengths of our people to help develop and fulfill their potential in many different varied paths. So Dr. Lim Wee Kiat, asked about the progress of aptitude-based admissions. Indeed, admission systems are moving away from an overemphasis on past academic results. NUS, for example, has recently announced that they are looking for polytechnic students with entrepreneurial experiences. And starting this year, NTU will introduce aptitude-based admissions for 40 out of its 111 degree programs. So it will involve interviews, showing of portfolios. In a similar vein, we introduced aptitude-based admissions at ITE and the polytechnics through what we call EAE, Early Admission Exercise. EAE, since it was implemented, it has now sparked a host of education and career guidance activities in secondary schools. Students now go through personality assessments, speak to industry practitioners and counselors, visit companies for their learning journeys in order to discover their interests and strengths. This is a good thing because self-discovery is actually a very worthwhile investment of time and effort when you are in secondary school. EAE will be rigorously run. The IHLs will require candidates to not just declare your interests and passion, but demonstrate them. Show portfolios, describe activities outside of school, or showing that you have knowledge of a particular subject that is outside of education curriculum. And interviews will have to be skillfully conducted. Mr. Lim Wee Kiak asked about appeals. It is inevitable that with EAE, the polytechnics will receive more appeals from applicants, which the polytechnics will have to evaluate objectively and independently. The rise in appeals is inevitable because EAE involves qualitative judgment and assessment. This is essential, and we must learn how to adapt to this and do this well if we want to shift away from an overemphasis on academic grades and inject more flexibility into our IHL posting system. So this year, admission to polytechnics saw a record number of EAE applicants at almost 14,000, 10% more than last year. We expect the final enrollment through EAE to stabilize at around 20% of total polytechnic intake. So in response to Mr. Zainal Zabari, with EAE well established, this year it will be expanded to working adults for the first time, with consideration given to their current and relevant work experience, and not just their previous school examination results. Mr. Sakthyandi Supaat asked if current procedures for application to polytechnics disadvantages ITE students. The answer is no, because although ITE students apply after O-level students, they belong to separate queues, and each group have separate places set aside for them. The way we deliver higher education has also shifted, with new work-learn pathways that champion learning by doing. So in 2017, we launched the ITE Work-Learn Technical Diploma. These courses provide ITE graduates with a skills-based apprenticeship pathway to attain a diploma. Last year, ITE launched 4 inaugural programs and enrolled more than 100 students. So in response to Mr. Ang Wei Neng's question is yes, ITE will expand the program. This year, ITE intends to launch another 10 programs and is already planning even more programs next year. The ITE Work-Learn Technical Diploma will become a mainstream major program in ITE. Learning by doing is also championed by our polytechnics and universities. Today, we have more than 100 Earn and Learn programs, and these have collectively placed 3,300 trainees into various industries. Our universities have launched a total of 16 Skills Future work-study degree programs, admitting over 150 students. One of the work-learn programs that I found especially meaningful is the one for social work at the SUSS, Singapore University of Social Sciences. You see, the social work industry, they are very proud of their profession, and so they require social workers to be degree holders. However, that impedes the career prospects of students that went to NYP to do a diploma in social work. And many of them go to NYP to do this diploma out of passion. But ironically, they cannot be certified as social workers. So they should be given the opportunity to also pursue a career in this field. Hence, MSF and SUSS developed a pathway for this group of students, this group of diploma graduates, so they can start work in the sector as associate social workers. Then with good performance, they can then be admitted into a bachelor's program at SUSS in social work, delivered in work-learn format. The students' prior education and working experience will be recognized, which means they can complete the program in 1.5 years, upon which they will then become certified social workers. Now, SUSS can do this because of its unique role as a university catering to working adults. Some years ago, I informed a former president of Singapore, the late Mr. S.R. Nathan, that a few AUs are keen to name one of their faculty after him. He said that if this was to be done, he would like it to be a faculty of UniSim, the precursor of SUSS. And when I asked him why, in his words, he said, because it's a university for someone like me. So today, we have the S.R. Nathan School of Human Development as SUSS. So to Associate Professor Walter Teixeira's question, MOE will certainly support all AUs and encourage sharing of resources where it is practical. So when MOE says every school is a good school, we do not mean that every school is the same, right? But that each has its own unique strengths and is good in its own way. And whether a school is good or not depends on how well it fits the students, not whether it is popular or branded or highly ranked. The same logic applies to our AUs. The clock don't stop when I drink water.
No, it doesn't.
Finally, I will talk about how we will introduce greater flexibility in our secondary school system by further expanding subject-based banding, or SBB. Mr. Leon Pereira talked about the importance of cultivating resilience, can-do spirit in our young. Ms. Denise Phua, Dr. Intan, talked about moving away from an unhealthy tuition culture. But how students, parents, teachers behave, what they focus on during education, these are results of deeply ingrained incentive structures in our labor market, our education system, in the way our society recognizes success. I think we cannot tackle this cultural issue with another promotional campaign, adding new stories into our syllabus, or adding more to our curriculum. We can do all that, but it will not fundamentally shift the underlying culture, which is deeply ingrained. Having said that, we are not helpless either. With the evolution of our education system and the broadening and rebalancing of how we measure success, we can shift the current culture. And indeed, we are starting to see changes. And this is why we launched the Learn for Life movement last year. The movement is a holistic, comprehensive, multi-year plan to evolve our education system for the future. And so we have two movements today. Learn for Life for school education, Skills Future for lifelong learning. There are a few major thrusts under the Learn for Life movement, and MOE has launched 2 of them. The first is to balance rigor and joy. If learning is just stress and no joy, there will be little chance of sparking passion and self-motivation that drives lifelong learning. This is why we are revamping the PSLE scoring system, introducing applied learning into schools, and rolling back examination load. The second thrust is uplift. MOE has established an interagency task force called Uplift, led by Second Minister Indrani Raja, to tackle the challenge of inequality. And she will talk about the work of Uplift later. Today I will explain the third thrust. One secondary education, many subject bands. As members know, our secondary school system comprises 3 streams: Express, Normal Academic, or NA, and Normal Technical, or NT. Ms. Dennis Phua, Mr. Ang Wei Neng, Mr. Charles Chong, Mr. Louis Ng, Dr. Intan have raised concerns about the streaming system. In fact, I want to acknowledge Ms. Dennis Phua and Dr. Intan, who has actually raised this concern for many years now. And this year, Mr. Louis Ng joined in the call. Let me first explain the background of streaming. Streaming was implemented during the efficiency-driven phase of the education system in the 1980s and 1990s. We were concerned about the huge number of dropouts who could not read or write at the end of primary school. So we had to move away from a one-size-fits-all education system, because if a student sits in class, cannot catch up, and don't understand the lesson, they will lose interest, and then they will drop out. But through streaming, we customize education according to the learning rates of our students. And it has successfully reduced school attrition rates from about 1/3 of every cohort to less than 1% now. The introduction of the NT stream contributed significantly to this outcome. So till today, we are benefiting from the legacy of the efficiency-driven education system. So I urge members not to casually juxtapose social stratification with streaming and just casually put them together, because without reducing attrition rate through streaming, social stratification would have been far, far worse. Over time, parents and students also began to see the benefit of learning at a pace and rigor suited to their academic abilities. Today, for students whose PSLE scores falls in borderline band, allows them a choice between 2 streams, there are many who in fact prefer a stream where they can study at a more comfortable pace and gain confidence by feeling that they are bigger fish in a smaller pond. However, there are downsides to streaming too. There is always some margin of error, especially if streaming is done at a young age. Further, in its original form, streaming assumed that students needed a certain pace of learning in all their subjects, whereas many students, in fact, have uneven strengths across different subjects. Finally, and more importantly, and raised by many members, entering a stream that is considered lower can carry a certain stigma that becomes self-fulfilling and self-limiting. Students can develop a mindset where they tell themselves, I'm only a normal stream student, and this is as good as I can be, and it becomes self-fulfilling. And I thank Mr. Ang Wei Neng, Dr. Intan, for sharing your personal experiences on this. So we have been grappling with this trade-off between customization of education and the downside of stigmatization. And that is why over the years, we have made significant changes to the streaming system. A major transition took place in the mid-2000s when MOE phased out streaming in primary school over a period of 4 years. As members would recall, we used to have 3 streams in primary school: EM1, EM2, and EM3. The first step then MOE did was to merge EM1 and EM2, since the only difference between the 2 streams was the standard of mother tongue language, or MTL. Later, MOE shifted to customizing learning not at the stream level, but at the subject level. So we introduced different standards for subjects. Standard and Foundation for English, Math, and Science, Higher Standard and Foundation for MTL. And so we called this subject-based banding, SBB, started since mid-2000s. Hence, by 2008, instead of having 3 streams, we have a single primary school course. And within the course, students could learn subjects at different standards based on SBB. There were skeptics at that time who asked, what's the difference between streaming and SBB? Old wine in new bottle, 换汤不换药. You merely change the labels of EM 1, 2, 3 to foundation standard and higher. That's all, it's the same. There is a big difference. Streaming separates education into different courses, and we put students into each course. So each course is like a big jar. You put all kinds of cookies into the jar, and then you close it and you label it pineapple tarts. So all the cookies inside, whatever they are, also get labeled as pineapple tarts, accurately or inaccurately. And SBB changes this fundamentally. Essentially, we now break the jar, students come out of it, take subjects of varying difficulty based on their academic ability. Taking 1 or 2 subjects at the foundation level will not tantamount to labeling a child. And equally important, it encourages the students to find their strengths. Since we introduced SBB, many students who would previously have been in the EM3 stream ended up taking 1 or more subjects at a higher level. So this way, we continue to reap the benefits of customization of education, but minimizing the downsides of labeling. This is much harder to do for secondary school because there are so many more subjects. So more than a decade ago, we started a form of SBB in secondary school by allowing students in the NA and NT streams to take up to 2 subjects at a higher level starting from Sec 3, if they have done well in those subjects when they are in lower secondary schools. It worked well. And in 2014, we formalized a bolder form of SBB in 12 secondary schools as pilot schools. NA-NT students in lower secondary could take English, MTL, Math, and Science at a more rigorous standards, if their PSLE scores or school examination results for these subjects justified. The results of this new pilot have been encouraging. So about half the NA students in the pilot schools took up subjects at express level. If I break down this half, 25% of NA students took 1 express level subject. Another 11% took 2 subjects. And over 10% took 3 subjects or were laterally transferred to express stream. So 25 plus 11 plus 10, adding up roughly half the NA students. If we had included MTL, mother tongue language, the numbers would be even higher. The numbers for NT students taking NA subjects are also largely similar. As of now, the 2 batches of students who have participated in SBB in the prototype schools, they have completed their secondary school national examinations. How did they do? Their results show that normal and express stream students taking the same O-level examinations performed comparably. To illustrate, for the national examinations in 2018, last year, 25% of secondary 4 NA students who took O-level English got A1 or A2, 25%. How about express students? 24%, 1% less. For O-level mathematics, 26% of NA students got A1 or A2. Express students, 50%, higher. For O-level combined science, it was NA students, 33%, express students, 34%. I think the normal stream students have held their own. Our surveys also showed that students, parents, teachers overwhelmingly welcome this. And given the positive outcomes, last year we expanded SBB nationwide. And we are now ready to take a further major move. It will involve a few significant policy steps over the next few years, and let me explain the process. There will be two important milestones, 2020 and 2024. Beginning in 2020, about 25 pilot secondary schools will implement full subject-based banding, full SBB, one more acronym, with more schools joining in the subsequent years. How is full SBB different from vanilla SBB today? So there are three main differences. Number one, we will allow lower secondary school students to study more subjects at a higher level, not just English, MTL, math, and science today, but also geography, history, literature. Chemistry, biology, this is only available in upper secondary. As it may be difficult to ascertain the level suitable for students using just their PSLE results, MOE and schools will develop guidelines and assessment mechanisms, including using Secondary 1 year-end examination results. Number two difference. We will also allow students of Express and NA streams the flexibility to take a subject offered in NA and NT streams respectively, to broaden their learning and experiences, or in instances where customization will help the student. So Express stream students today are already exposed to technical subjects, such as design and technology. In time, Express students may take subjects offered in the normal streams, such as mobile robotics. Three, the third big difference. Beyond the academic aspects, full SBB will also give pilot schools an opportunity to reshape the social environment in schools to benefit their students. Day-to-day practices in schools play a big part in shaping a child's self-confidence, sometimes more than the academic curriculum. I learned this from Mr. Tan Chaw Pang, the principal of Boon Lay Secondary. Mr. Patrick Tay knows him very well. The late coming and absenteeism rates amongst normal stream students in Boon Lay Secondary had not been healthy. However, Chaw Pang observed that when it comes to CCA, all the students are very engaged. So in an unprecedented move, he figured, let's just change the way we organize classes. And after all, Boon Lay Secondary have a smaller environment, smaller school enrollment, so he gave him the flexibility. So he reorganized form classes according to CCAs rather than academic streams. And almost immediately, absenteeism, late coming rates fell drastically. I was fascinated by this unorthodox practice and decided to visit the school and speak to teachers and students. So I found out every morning students will gather in their CCA groups, which is their form class, for morning assembly. They also undergo character and citizenship education classes, learning journeys together as a form class based on CCA. For academic lessons, they then break out into different classes based on SBB. So I asked the students, why the big reduction in late coming and absenteeism rates when the principal changed the class organization? The students were frank. They told me many of them actually had personal and family problems. Teachers and counselors help, but they also need peer support, especially from their seniors and friends in their CCA group. So now they look forward to attending morning assembly because this is when they meet their friends and seniors from their CCA groups. One student told me, now I can pour my heart out to my seniors every morning before assembly, even for 10 minutes. But to do so, I must come to school and come on time and in fact 10 minutes earlier. Another normal stream student told me something quite profound. He said in the past, during morning assembly, a teacher might admonish a noisy class and say, 4 NT, keep quiet. Immediately, all the NT students felt that they were singled out. Today, the teacher said, NCC, keep quiet. And the normal stream students felt, okay. The students who have gone through almost 2 years of the new form classes in Boon Lay Secondary, they have recently completed their secondary school national examinations. Across the school, results had shown improvement. MOE, we will need to study their results further, but there is now a genuine belief that the social environment of the school can positively influence the students' academic behavior and performance. I also visited another school, Edgefield Secondary, which has decided to reorganize form classes to include students from all 3 streams starting this year. Not by CCA, but just academic classes, but mixed students from all 3 streams. So each secondary 1 form class goes through about half their lessons together for subjects like CCE, design and technology, art, music, PE, where there is little need to customize lessons based on academic abilities. And the other half comprising academic subjects, English, MTL, math, science, they are grouped according to SBB. It has only been a couple of months, but feedback has been generally good. The students I spoke to, they have no comparison, so they all say it's very good, very happy, as expected. The teachers noticed that students were helping each other more frequently in class. And students from the normal stream, they are stepping forward to take up leadership roles during group work or project teamwork. I chatted with several students at the canteen, and I asked them, you all think this is great, how about your parents? And they said their parents felt it was okay. One student said, my father thought this is awesome. This is awesome. The principal, Mr. Lee Pek Ping, told me that, however, a handful of parents were concerned that this might slow down learning in class. Pek Ping painstakingly explained how SBB works, that what students are learning together as a form class and how classes for academic subjects are still banded based on the learning abilities of the students. And this explanation, through this explanation, he managed to address the concerns of most parents. He told me a small number of parents were still worried and felt that had they known, they wouldn't have sent their child to Edgefield Secondary. I understand the concerns of these parents, but Edgefield Secondary was making the right trade-off to develop students both academically and socially. It was in its own way taking the lead in reshaping our existing culture for the better. Schools such as Boon Lay and Edgefield are important trailblazers, and I thank them. After several years of progressively implementing SBB, and with good outcomes both academically and socially, the time is right for us to move to full SBB. Implementing full SBB will be a multi-year transition. We should not underestimate the challenge of this move. There are major operational challenges, such as timetabling. Schools will need time to learn, adapt, and innovate. By the start of 2024, I just talked about the milestone of 2020, now 2024, we will be ready to take the next step, which is the most crucial. 2 things will happen. 1, we would have rolled out full SBB and the new ways of organizing form classes across the education system. The pioneering practices in Boon Lay and Edgefield will by then become the norm. 2, to reflect the reality of full SBB as a more flexible single course, we will enroll the first batch of Secondary 1 students who will graduate with a common secondary school certificate. This common certificate will combine the current O-level NA, and NT certificates. It will list the subjects completed and the standard band of each subject, very much like what Dr. Intan described yesterday. And we are not unfamiliar with this concept. It is actually similar to A-level certificate for JCs, where the certificate states the subjects and the standards they are completed in, whether it is H1, H2, or H3. For secondary school, we won't use H, we will use G. G1, G2, G3. G stands for general. I have to go find out what H stands for. G1 will roughly correspond to today's NT standard, G2 to NA standard, and G3 to Express standard. Singapore and Cambridge will co-brand this new certificate. We are both strong international brand names in education, and this, by working together, we will enhance the recognition and value of this certificate. So with full SBB implemented, form classes reorganized across the board, and a combined secondary school education certificate, we would have effectively merged Express, NA, NT into a single course. The Express, NA, NT streams, together with its label, will be phased out. So from 3 education streams, we now have one secondary education, many subject bands. We will no longer have fishes swimming down 3 separate streams. We have one broad river, each fish negotiating its own journey. I'm sure there are many questions on how all this will work. Some of them we need to learn as we do, but let me answer a few key ones. An immediate question is whether we will keep Secondary 5. It is a key concern among students and parents because for NA students today, attaining O-level through Secondary 5 help them access polytechnics and JCs. Our plan is that by 2024, all students will enroll into Secondary 1 and go through a 4-year curriculum for all subject bands. At the end of Secondary 4, these students will attain the common certificate I talked about with various permutations. Some will have 6 G3 subjects and 1 G2 subject. Some will have 5 G3s and 2 G2s. Others maybe 2 G3s, 3 G2, 1 G1, and so on. Lots of permutation. So this will require us to undertake a review of our post-secondary posting system so that students taking a combination of G1, G2, G3 subjects can be fairly considered for ITE, polytechnics, and JCs. Our review will recognize students' particular strengths that make them suitable for specific post-secondary courses. 2024 is a few years away, so we will use this time to undertake this review. We will also explore other alternatives to a 5th year in secondary schools, like the current PFP, Polytechnic Foundation Program, to help students bridge over to polytechnics and JCs. Another question is, currently, the great majority of secondary schools admit students from the Express, NA, and NT streams. Now is one stream, one course. How will the secondary school posting system change? MOE has thought this through and concluded that it is better not to disrupt the current posting system. This means that secondary schools should continue to admit students across 3 PSLE scoring bands, even though the streams have been merged. Educationally, this approach is both practical and reasonable and sound, because the transition from primary 6 to secondary 1 is a very major one and a significant one for all students. And we need students to start off right. PSLE still serves as a useful initial gauge of the subject bands that each student is most suited for at the beginning of secondary 1. So students admitted in the first PSLE scoring band will initially take mostly G1 subjects. Those in the second PSLE scoring band will take mostly G2 subjects, and those in the third PSLE scoring band will take mostly G3 subjects. Admitting students across 3 PSLE score bands will allow schools to offer subjects of all bands. But once in secondary school, students can discover and further develop their strengths and interests, and full SBB will enable them to diverge into various paths, taking a combination of subjects across different bands. There is also an important social consideration. Admitting students from different PSLE scoring bands into the same secondary school will ensure that our students get to make friends from diverse backgrounds. And indeed, one of the key objectives of education is to forge a cohesive society. This leads to the third question, which is then what happened to Spectra and Crest, which currently take in only NT students, or schools with specialized programs such as NUS High, School of Science and Tech, integrated program schools that take in only express stream students today. Will MOE mandate that they take in students across all 3 PSLE score bands? There is value in having certain schools taking a whole school approach in implementing specialized programs. Every education in the world, every education system in the world will have schools that cater specifically to different segments of students, such as those with high academic ability, strengths in specific area, or much prefer hands-on vocational and technical training. Such a diverse education system can complement the plan to move beyond streaming. We should maintain and balance diversity across schools and within the school to allow us to better cater to the educational needs and strengths of different groups of students. The downside is the lack of mixing in these more specialized schools. These schools, they have to make a special effort to recruit students from all backgrounds, wisely using their direct school admission or DSA mechanism. They will have to ensure that students participate actively in inter-school mixing opportunities, such as combining school CCAs, outward-bound school camps, or values in action projects, where week in, week out, students from different schools get to mingle together. And I can see many of the principals from the specialized schools working very hard to do better in this aspect. There is also scope for these specialized schools to offer more subject options. Spectra and Crest should offer more NA subjects compared to today, and could possibly also offer a few express-level subjects. Similarly, in time, it will also make sense for the schools that take in only express students to offer some subjects at the NA or NT level. After all, customization of education and catering more flexibly to the varied interests and abilities of students will benefit them. Mr. Chairman, let me conclude. The emphasis of our education system has evolved over the years. 4 decades ago, we made major progress in customizing education to reduce student attrition. From 2 decades ago, we have been redesigning the system to develop the varied abilities of our students. What is the focus now? In the digital era, knowledge has become very accessible. One smartphone and you have access all kinds of knowledge. But skills carry a premium. Skills, both technical and soft, are what make us human, inoculate us from being replaced by robots and computers. But skills take a lifetime to acquire and hone, and one must be driven by passion to do so. So skills, passion, growth. In this phase, more than ever, we are centered on the need to learn for life, to prepare our students for the future. The third thrust of our Learn for Life movement, one education system, many subject bands, is another step in this direction. We are able to take these steps now because of work done in the past. So in a way, whatever I have just announced could have been anticipated. In fact, many MPs who urged for the phasing out of streaming made references to the SBB and saw this as a natural extension of all the work that we have done. And this has to be our attitude when it comes to education. Never complacent, always anticipating the future. Figure out what needs to change, plan it out, implement at a pace that takes into account the trade-offs, the complexities, and the immense impact any change will have on our students. We should never stay frozen for long periods and only to make sudden changes years later. So any change that can be compared to the slaughtering of any animal is probably a bad idea. I'm confident that one secondary education, many subject bans will benefit many students. Let me share a personal story. I grew up in a Chinese-speaking family. When I was young, the only books I read was Chinese comics. I entered primary one not being able to understand English very much less reading and writing. My late mother, Chinese teacher, tried to teach me, but her own English is very limited. And sometime in primary 3, I had a eureka moment, you know. I still remember it vividly. I figured if B-A-R is bar, B-E-R is burr, B-A-R-B-E-R, I can put it together, and it's barber, the guy who cut my hair. So I figured out phonics in P3. So from then on, I could start to read English books. My first book, Three Musketeers. So I could read the words and the sentences, but I have a problem. I don't know what it means. So in secondary school, my English standard was what my classmates will describe as cannot swim. And this affected my other language-dependent subjects, such as history and geography. So how do we pass? We memorize large chunk of text. And the exam, and you keep your fingers crossed, the exam question spotted correctly, then you regurgitate what you memorize. Exam question come out wrongly, also regurgitate anyway. But if I were in primary school today, I would probably have been put into an LSP, Learning Support Program, which would have done me a lot of good. In secondary school, it would also have been better for me to be placed in a less demanding band for English, which will give me time to pick up the basics and then upgrade to a more demanding band if I can meet the standard. So I should have done G2 or G1 English. There are some students who are very strong in every academic subject, but most, like myself, have uneven strengths, even specific weaknesses. It is just the way humans are. The challenge of our education system is to cater to that. And that is the central purpose of this change. Put to rest the mistaken notion that there is a single dominant path to success that starts from a very young age. The school system will become more flexible, far more flexible than today, so that we can customize learning to the student to give them time to blossom at different points in their lives, while anchoring the belief that we can grow and get better. Beyond schools, the IHL landscape then offers even more varied pathways for the student to develop and grow based on his talents and his strengths. In making this change, we are developing a child with the knowledge that the pace of his or her learning changes with time, all the way to adulthood. We are acting on our conviction that our students benefit most when there is diversity across schools and within schools. Above all, we are guided by our belief that no child's fate is fixed, and in an environment that encourages growth and development, they will fulfill their potential to be sons and daughters of Singapore that we can be proud of. Mr. Chairman, thank you.